Hey, everybody, and welcome to Geeksvana Live. I hope you're all very well this evening. Thank you very much for joining me. Tonight, we're going to be talking about quite an interesting topic. Well, why would I say that? Why wouldn't it be an interesting topic here on Geeksvana? But we're going to be talking about the National Trust and the fact that they have updated their drone policy on their website and really talk through what has changed, but also beyond that, give a little bit of thoughts and process in terms of my own sort of the way that I fly around those sites and bits and pieces of information that I think might actually be useful to the drone community, particularly recreational flyers out there. So if you've got any questions, if you've got any particular things that you want to point out here, do tag Geeksvana in the chat. If you're watching the replay, please do comment with your thoughts below. And if you wouldn't mind, the regulars that are watching this, whether that's the replay or the live, could you go ahead and hit the like button nice and early? I won't ask you to do too many things apart from like and subscribe, because hey, that's what us cheesy YouTubers have to do, frankly. So everybody hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. So moving on to the subject straight away, many of us in the UK are aware that the National Trust have, shall we call it, a reputation for not exactly supporting recreational drone flight at their locations. Previous policies published on their website even discussed preventing overflight of land and property managed by them. So first up today, we're going to go through the updated policy and discuss what has changed. And as I say, we're going to follow it up with a bit of guidance and areas of information that I think recreational pilots might actually benefit from. So let's take a look at the website as I press a couple of very quick buttons there. So a very nice photograph of a very, very large commercial drone being flown on one of their sites, flying drones at our places. So as a landowner, the National Trust does not permit drone operations from any of our land and properties. The National Trust does regularly make use of drones for survey, inspection, filming and photography. Such work is commissioned in response to specific needs and undertaken by us by professional contractors. Very cool. We may also grant permission for drone-related commercial filmed by established professional production companies in certain circumstances. So then the next bit, which is the bit that we're more interested in, of course, drone flying by members of the general public. Sounds like a shocking thing to do. We do not grant permission for private flying from our land and properties for the following reasons. Our members and visitors value the peace and tranquility of our places. The presence of drones can impinge on the quiet enjoyment of our places by other visitors and therefore potentially presents a public nuisance risk. Many of our places have wildlife or agricultural animals which are sensitive to disturbance, such as birds and deer herds, which could be alarmed or stressed by the presence of drones, especially at breeding times. Many of our places are the homes of our tenants or donor families. We respect and value their privacy, and drone use would be an infringement of that privacy. Interesting that they say would be an infringement of that privacy. Most drones have cameras attached, of which could contravene National Trust rules on commercial photography and filming. If a drone causes damage or harm, pilots who are members of the general public rarely have the correct insurances or levels of insurance to adequately compensate those affected. Flying by contractors is an interesting bit as well. We do make use of drones if there is a benefit in doing so. Such occasions could include roof inspections, wildlife surveys. However, in such cases, we will specifically commission the work from carefully selected professional contractors. In these circumstances, we're able to check the competence, qualification, and certification of the contractor, stipulate appropriate levels of insurance, and set appropriate conditions and controls on work to ensure public safety, resident privacy, and minimize disturbance to wildlife. We do not respond to cold calling from contractors seeking to sell drone-related services. Good one to know. And then commercial filming, they go on to say pretty much the same thing that you would expect on most things, that commercial filming, they may grant it for drone-related commercial filming in certain circumstances. In general terms, production company must follow the same competency and insurance rules as those required for contractors. So it's an interesting one. From that point of view with the commercial and the filming. But obviously this bit is the bit that we're most interested in terms of the flying by the general public. And there's obviously a few things there which are, have changed, I would say, more in a subtlety, in a more subtle ways, rather than being anything controversial. So overall, it's good news from the point of view that they're not trying to control the airspace. They have updated their policy to talk about the right kind of language. So overflight really is the main difference, where national trusts are no longer trying to insist that they can control that, which is good news. Otherwise, there really isn't much significant change. It is significant in terms of the National Trust recognizing that, but there are a few points that I would just like to keep clear within our minds to obviously help us enjoy a better flight there, which I think are important, which we will come on to. But it's also no longer, it seems to be a general thought process. They haven't mentioned the good old bylaws in place at most of their sites in terms of being active in terms of overflight as well. That was always one of the things where they said, because they held this bylaw, you also can't overfly. So it's good to see that that's being dropped from the updated policy page as well. And it doesn't actually make any reference to the bylaw at all. So whether or not they've taken advice and see whether or not it's fully enforceable is complete conjecture on my point, but it's always been a debate there. So they seem more focused on explanation in terms of insurance, etc. So they seem to want to actually give an explanation really as well in terms of why they don't want drone flight there. And to me, insurance has always been one of the key factors, in my opinion, from the point of view of, any kind of crash that could happen. Obviously, if it's around one of the properties, around one of the buildings, that could cause damage as well there. And of course, there's lots of people around, invariably, depending on the time of day that you go. So it's clearly, in my opinion, an attempt to distance themselves from anything which might happen. So sort of banging on about the fact that they don't want the recreational drone flight there because of that particular issue. So the National Trust also link on that page to their own explanation of the countryside code. So there again, they're trying to focus us on how we all act in perhaps societal terms when on their property, etc. So there's a few key points as well that I think that this raises, and one of those is the fact that the knowledge of policy, and really an interesting discussion point for us all to consider when we're out flying is, how does flying a drone at a location where we know the landowner doesn't want drone flight from, etc., impact our planning? I still personally fly at National Trust locations, but there are a few key extra steps I like to take, which we will talk about today. However, I would say, think about this point when you're flying in terms of taking extra steps around emergency situation planning, etc., if you need to bring your drone down and that type of thing. Now, I have one other thing I want to show as well, which I think could be very useful in terms of takeoff and landing, which is a map. And this particular map actually has everything on here in terms of both freehold and leasehold. So property that they own and property that they manage in terms of the National Trust. And you can see with these little graphics here that you can actually, I'm thinking my mouse is showing on the screen, apologies. And you can see that it shows the borders and the outside extremities. I do use this map in terms of choosing my takeoff position, but also in terms of planning. So when I'm actually planning my flight, in terms of saying, okay, well, I can take off from X location, and this one is obviously Stonehenge, which has a fairly complex sort of ownership around it there. But this also, and also there's obviously increased security there as well for all sorts of reasons. But this obviously gives you the advantage of being able to plot out where you can actually fly from, which I think is excellent. XJet, can you power loop the stones at Stonehenge? No, you can't, sadly. But certainly in terms of planning your flight, so you've got VLOS of the thing that you want to capture, this kind of map can be very, very helpful. And there will obviously be a link in the description after the show to that. So, but it gives you the position to take off from, which perhaps with the support of that map, although it's always good not to count on any app or website, as there could be issues there and that type of thing. So we need to make sure that we're 110% sure of where we're taking off, and be prepared to be challenged, of course. There is one other thing which is very important in terms of when you are flying your drone at National Trust locations, and that is soft targets, people. And many of the landscapes that you're going to visit too will have a lot of people, but obviously being landscapes, they tend to be a little bit more spread out. But in terms of the properties, we will find that it is a risk factor that we need to try and minimize as much as possible. These people will be uninvolved in your flight and will have no clue that a drone is flying in the area, especially when you factor in how quiet drones like a Mini 3 Pro are. Thank you very much, Johnny DRC. Good to see you for your $2 super chat. I really appreciate it, sir. Thank you. And you're also a channel member, so thank you for your direct support of the channel. Now, there's no practical way to make these people involved in your flight under the definition from the CAA, so you're better off obviously trying to avoid them completely. It makes sense, and I know many of us will already be taking steps on this, but you should always keep in mind that where people are, the path they're going to take can change very quickly, that type of thing, especially at locations like National Trust properties, where you'll often find people congregating to look at a particular point of interest or perhaps around facilities, etc. I often think of people at these sites as NPCs in computer games, where they often bunch together, sometimes for no reason, and have these little strange, almost migratory feeling paths where these little groups tend to start congregating. So consider your flight path in terms of where the existing people are, but also obviously be ready to change your flight plans if the situation on the ground changes. Now, if you're flying something like a sub 250 gram drone like the DJI Mini 3 Pro, as previously mentioned, you are of course allowed to overfly people, but the definition of a group where you cannot fly is pretty tight these days. If the people cannot easily get out of the way, then you should not be flying over them. Add to that your position. So bear in mind, you're of course going to be off the land itself that's controlled or owned by the landowner. So you could be a large castle wall or partitioning wall or two away from those people, and your ability to see the changing flows in foot traffic will obviously be impacted. So just be aware of that when you're looking on the camera and that type of thing, and just really try to have a look around. The time of day is another one which I would say in terms of risk factor, and it's probably one of the tips that removes a lot of the other risk factors. Try to keep flight hours to where there are obviously less people around. You'll also get those sexy shots, of course, during golden hour, which is always a good one to do. Now, you also need to have a think about the what if scenarios. So in any drone flight, things do and will go wrong, or could rather go wrong. Flying a DJI drone, it's fantastic because it's automated, it's extremely reliable, the chances of failure, that type of thing, are extremely low. But thinking it will never happen is really a recipe for potential problems in the future. Think more about the what ifs. And the more that you think about the what ifs, you have, less access to the property itself, so therefore you could have issues if you need to land suddenly, that type of thing. So I always like to have an emergency landing area within line of sight ready in case it is needed. Now, you might not be able to fly your drone back for a number of reasons. You may be halfway around an orbit or something, and something happens. It's a problem with the battery, problem with winds, or something that you haven't anticipated until you're up in the air. There could be a number of reasons, but actually you can't bring that drone back. So it's good to have at least another emergency landing location scouted out, so that you can land there instead, again within visual line of sight of where you are. So bear in mind of things of landing in behind walls and that type of thing, and of course attempting to land away from the property. So I would always physically scout out the location as well, just to make sure there's nothing closer to the ground in terms of any kind of issues there. XJet always ties string to your drone for manual return to home functionality. You could do that. You could. I'm not sure I would do that, but you could. Now, personally, when taking off where the flight might be around uninvolved people, I do actually take a few pictures of the location to show how it looked, etc., at the point of my actual flight. So, for instance, I will, I'll get my phone and I'll actually physically take a few photos. That's only if there's uninvolved people around that I tend to do that, because I like to show how it was when I took off, if there's ever a future question, ever any kind of problem there. But again, that is just a personal thing that I do. Now, there is good old Article 241, of course. We've been hearing about this in a lot of places. A lot of places have been using my clip from one of my videos to talk about this as well. It is discussed more and more online. It is something which is coming up more and more with drone flight, and it of course does cover every single flight. And it does state that a person must not recklessly or negligently cause or permit an aircraft to endanger any personal property. I rattle that off so quickly, it's almost as if I've said it a few times, but you need to keep it in mind whilst planning your flights and actually carrying them out. So overall, really do just be careful. River Mersey, hi. Thank you for your super sticker of popcorn for a couple of pounds there. I really appreciate it. Hope you're well, sir. I don't think I've seen you for a while. You're also I think you're a channel member, actually, from memory. memory, but yeah, it's good to see you. And Tazzy, another channel member with a £2 super sticker of a smiling cat. Thank you, sir. The next one to talk about, and this was actually brought up directly on the National Trust policy, is actually privacy. Now, I'm not going to talk much on this point because it isn't necessarily something directly connected with your drone flight unless you're being very silly. But anyway, but many of the locations the National Trust either own or look after are indeed also someone's home. So consider that in terms of when you're recording what height you're at, that type of thing, and also something to perhaps consider in the edit too, especially as the flight will be focusing on the property. I always look at things from the point of view that obviously if I'm filming a location and that property, that building is also somebody's home, obviously there'll be a certain part of it or perhaps cottages or a separate building, but it's still part of that property and I'm filming, focusing the camera, filming at it. Obviously that's someone's house, so we need to take their privacy into account when we're doing that. If it's their personal home, of course they have more rights in terms of privacy as well, so we just need to be a little bit careful in those terms, and also just from the point of view of obviously being good ambassadors for the recreational drone community as well. But it's something to think about, because obviously privacy is something that we kind of throw back at people a lot when we're out generally flying, because of course we're flying our drone at a reasonable height across the top of houses, so but we're not, our camera isn't trained on their gardens or trained on their house and that type of thing, whereas in this situation that could actually be something which is actually happening. And as XJet is saying in a more concise way, don't be an arse. Yes indeed. And thank you Trevor Fuss for your I think it's Australian dollar super sticker again of the smiling cat. You'd think I like cats or something, wouldn't you? One of my cats has escaped and followed me to the studio. No. So do consider that. And, think about things like the height of your drone, and also when you're in the edit process as well. As I say, particularly because you're going to be looking at the drone itself, the property itself, rather than sort of a generic flight. So just be careful on that. So let's have a look at the chat and see what people are talking about here. We'll go all the way back through to the top. Let me know if you've got any questions or anything that you want to know on this, or any statements. People chatting about ATC, which is always interesting. Thank you very much for joining us all. Great to see 176 people in with us this evening. I really do appreciate it. To me, this policy from the National Trust is getting on for about as fair and about as concise in terms of not automatically trying to infringe on our rights as drone pilots, the legal rights we have of access to airspace. It's getting on for just about as fair as I think it could get. Now, I have heard of other things in the past and other sort of ideas of, why don't they charge a few pound and open up the airspace and let people come fly there from time to time? And I can see that, but I'm not sure how practical that is. I'm not sure whether or not that's something which is going to necessarily happen. But it's good to see that they have the set requirements set out, because again, this helps in terms of when you come across National Trust employees and that type of thing, that we're able to then revert them back to the website and say, look, it actually now doesn't say anything about the airspace, which I think is an important thing. Paul, Steel City Drone Pilot, good to see you. Hope you're well. So cars with loud exhausts aren't louder than an incredibly quiet Mini 3. Yeah, well, I think there you're looking for us to be held to the same standard as everybody else, but we know that doesn't happen with us evil drone pilots, Paul. Legwork, but they always normally have car parks for 150 plus vehicles, which are all electric. I take it, so no noise or pollution. Yeah, exactly. Norm Bright, they needed to change that large drone photo. It gives the drone community a bad name. Most are now small drones. Yeah, and we were talking about this obviously on the live show last week in terms of how do we win the public over, as it were. And I don't mean the so-called Karens and other people that have already got an issue, but the general public in terms of recreational drone use. And I do agree with you that photos like this one don't exactly, if somebody says, hey, I'm going to fly this drone over your house or over Leeds Castle whilst you were there on a day out with your family, that sounds quite scary, doesn't it? It sounds quite intimidating. And I realize that photo is probably there in terms of the commercial work that they're talking about, but actually I'm not entirely sure that it shouldn't just show a little Mini 3, as you're saying, in the in the palm of our hand. There you go. I've got a Mini 2 here. Anyone watching this, that the algorithm has brought you here and you're looking at this from the point of view that you're worried about drone flight, this is about the size of the type of drone, sub 250-gram drone. This is a Mini 2. That you're going to find probably flying over the land. You're not, in my opinion, going to get, in the height of the height of the sort of midday sun, a 5-inch FPV drone ripping around. You're not going to get anything like the large scale drones that we see on the National Trust website there coming through. It's something like this. It really is something very, very light. Obviously, nobody wants anything to come down and hit them on the head, but yes. Put that back before I end up stepping on it when I come off air. Okay, and Andy Cortez, nice use of could. One of my farts could kill someone, for Pete's sake. Yeah, and it is always in language, isn't it? And yes, XJet's talking about the story there, which was in the Daily Mail. A falling satellite has a 1 in 2,500 chance of killing someone when it plunges to Earth tomorrow. Yes, and it's yeah. Indeed, and I know you've drawn reference that across. The River Mersey saying nothing's changed then, yet the Crown recognise that drones can be flown over much of their land and sea. Yeah, the Crown access map has always been a thing. The change here is really in terms of their recognition that they can't control overflight. And that is a significant one, because the problem that I always had, certainly with local staff that I spoke to, is that of course on their own website, in their own policy, it says that, and that is the thing which they that most members of staff then actually listen to, basically. Mo, hi, thank you. And I'm only calling you Mo because in the pre-chat you introduced yourself as Mo, so I hope you're well, sir. So you can't fly Mini 3 Pro on National Trust sites. There's a differential, Mo, between taking off from where you take off from and overflying. So overflight at a reasonable level and a reasonable height in open, unrestricted airspace, without any kind of restrictions, no FRZs, it's no temporary restrictions, can't stress that enough, is perfectly permissible. And there is nobody that can take that away from you, apart from very, very select bylaws, trying to cover all caveats there. But the only thing that National Trust can stop you doing over their sites in general, as a legal entity, as an organisation, is they can stop you taking off from within their sites. So when you look at maps like this, which is showing the National Trust boundaries, when you zoom in, etc., and you find, roads, roadsides, that type of thing, little car parks, etc. So, ever so technically, you want to go that close, you could take off from the side of a road here, that type of thing, and then be able to fly out. Now, whether or not that will get you what you want within line of sight is obviously down to whether that's practical. There are going to be sites that when you're keeping your drone within visual line of sight, you're just not going to be able to capture them, because where you can stand off site is obviously, you're not going to be able to see the drone anymore once it's over where you're trying to record. So keep that in mind as well. Mark Big Bear, thank you. A $5 super chat. I hope you're well, sir. All the best to you as well, sir. And Drone Vision, a £2 super chat. Hope they train their staff accordingly as well. Indeed, and that's very much one of the points there, Drone Vision, that hopefully we'll actually see a situation where at least we can. Hopefully that will happen, but at least we can actually show people the website on their own, on their own, the page on their own website, rather, getting my words the wrong way around there. And again, I just want to bring that one up one more time, that can you power loop the stones at Stonehenge? I think it's probably something that I wouldn't recommend. And Norm Bright, one man in his drone, thank you for the £5 super chat as well. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate all the direct support that you're showing this evening. I really do appreciate it. Yeah, Norm Bright. No one's allowed to fly in the National Trust, but audits allowed to do whatever they want. This is one of the areas that, particularly the organised audit channels, you'll find that they are very hot on, that they're very careful about, in terms that they will actually fly from public land. So they'll ensure that where they're stood when they take off is on public land. But again, they wouldn't be allowed to fly off National Trust land itself as well, of course, and would probably get them in a lot of trouble. Bruce XJet, Bruce, don't lead me astray today, thank you. if you hit them, they become involved. Well, yes, but perhaps in the wrong way. Cool Cat, I might theoretically, Cool Cat would like to add a disclaimer of all disclaimers are not, all messages are actually typed by someone else and not him. I might have flown around Salisbury Cathedral quite a few summers back. The footage was allegedly quite beautiful. Hardly anyone was killed. Well, you need to keep the number of deaths down as much as possible, Cool Cat. And really, I mean, that's interesting from that point, because it's one of the things that obviously us as a community, we do sit and shout about. We say, hey, no one's died. Where's the risk assessment? What are the problems here? But with this is probably with flying at National Trust sites, English heritage sites, tourist locations like this is probably one of the points where we have the opportunity, and this is just me on my soapbox for a minute, and I'm sorry, and I apologize to the rebels out there, but we have an opportunity here to act responsibly in terms of the general public and actually be ambassadors and do things properly and really think about how we would want to see somebody else fly drones. I don't know about you, but I have seen drone flights when I've been out in public, and I thought, I'm not sure I would have done that. And that's really how we need to think about things. This is an opportunity. TMA droning. What about private land that has been opened by the public and that the public pay to access? No signs and no statements to say not to use drones, airspace open and legal, and not practical to ask the owner. Yeah, which is the rabbit hole. TMA droning is one of the things that I wrestle with, probably one of the questions that I wrestle with fairly frequently. You probably don't want to, people at home, I apologize for putting the picture of me wrestling in your minds and enforcing it. But it is one of the things that I wrestle with in terms of, how far down the rabbit hole do you go? Now, as recreational pilots, the drone code asks us to look out for signs, be aware of bylaws that might not be appearing on things like drone assist, etc., and be reasonable about it. And that's really where I think you can be. And bear in mind, if it's private land and, as you say, everything else is open to access, it appears that you can be in that location, etc. I have flown from those locations. I do not know personally on every recreational flight that I take. It's not as if I've got the land registry downloaded or something to make sure I can absolutely definitely take off from that location. I'm just aware that if the landowner or representative or someone claiming to be the landowner walks up and says, hey, I don't want you standing here and doing that, obviously they say I don't want you coming over the top, that's a whole different argument. But yeah, it is something which I think you are okay to do from the point of view that obviously at that point it's just a civil issue. It's a landowner asking you to leave their property. You haven't, as you say, you haven't jumped a fence. There aren't signs up saying don't do something or don't come on this land, etc. So yeah, and I've flown at locations, and he's just following up that's for takeoff and landing. So yes, so I have answered it in that way. What if a meteor hits my drone and knocks a prop off? If you're recording and you have that on film, then the what if there is you're going to hopefully be a very rich man, Bruce. That's for sure. Ian Simpson, watch out for angry natives too. Best I've seen is a crash drone when the pilot was chased by angry swans. Yes, indeed. And again, I don't think there's anybody in the drone community that wants to disturb herding deer or cattle, agricultural animals, etc., as described on their policy. I think as a policy, I don't have a massive, a huge issue with what they're asking for and what they're saying. Now that it's much more focused on, the insurance side of things, if things go wrong, and perhaps more the safety side of things. Minelab map, or take a sledge to the drone because rules, laws, ifs, that's are too much and they're taking the bleep. Yeah, again, this to me is a step backwards in the right, so the step back in terms of overreach, in terms of, it's a step forward in terms of the correct wording being used. So from that point of view, I think it's a good thing that they're not trying to say that they control the airspace anymore. And now that it's the correct wording, I'd love to see the recreational community in particular to really, get things to move forward. And Cool Cat there spotting the fact that we're now put the chat on the back screen, he could see himself, which is awesome. I'll keep it back on there. David Emerald Outdoors, hi, great to see you. Outdoors Sorry, outdoors, that's part of your username. I love my Mini 3 Pro. I used to fly the Phantom, and that gave me anxiety, but the Mini 3 is no bother at all. Completely and utterly agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more. I have a range of drones, all the way up to the Inspire and Inspire 2, which are under my desk here. Unfortunately, not unboxed. But we have the Air 2Ss, the Parrots, the Mini 3s, the Avata, and that type of thing. And I have to say, more and more, the two drones which are coming out with me, particularly in terms of recreational flights, is the Mini 3 Pro and the Avata, because with the A2 CFC, the Avata also can be flown in the A1 airspace as well, just not over people. So, but yeah, I can completely understand where you're coming from with that one. Let me just see if there's anything else here. Chris Hearn. Hi, Chris. Hope you're well. 3D Oldie, one of our channel members and a long-time viewer. I hope you're extremely well, sir. I read CAP 722 last night. NT new rules. I have an A2 CFC and GVC. I will drop the GVC this time, as I feel that slowly but surely the hobby is being strangled with more hoops. Yeah, this obviously is a policy of a landowner, so it doesn't impact that. But I understand where you're coming from in the general side of things. You're going to be dropping the GVC when. So, do you have an operational authorization that you're going to drop this time? And I'd be interested, actually, is that something which you've used recreationally, or do you use it professionally, commercially? Be interested in that one. Borders Drone Seekers. Hi, good to see you. National Trust area that I fly is great. Just need to phone them and let them know I'm about to fly. As long as it's not during bird nesting season, they're okay with it. And that's that. Thank you for raising that point, Borders Drone Seekers, because that's actually one of the other factors that I would always put into this, from the point of view that when you're flying on National Trust sites, I often find that the local staff, the local managers, etc., are actually more than okay with it, especially if you're in off-peak hours and that type of thing. So it is always worth having a chat with them. But particularly if you're aware that there is anything going on there in terms of animals and that type of thing, it is good to try and make sure everything's okay there. So yeah, it's a really good point, sir. Good to hear. Rod Piker, Drones UK. Hi, I hope you're well, sir. Good to see you as well. Another one of our long-term viewers. I've had a lot of problems here in Northern Ireland with National Trust calling the police and dictating to me about laws that don't exist. Rod, I'd be interested to see if you think this new policy will help that, from the point of view that you then be able to obviously turn around and say, actually, what I'm doing is completely legal. Because if anyone wants to see some fantastic cinematic footage of Northern Ireland and the amazing sites that are around there, certainly head over to Rod Piker Drones UK. He's got some absolutely outstanding videos on there that go back months and months and years, frankly. So I'd be interested to see if you think that this new policy will help or will make no difference to you as well, Rod. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that. Exploring with Jeff. They cannot stop me flying legally over their land within all the usual drone rules. Exactly. I'll also license the video of their property via stock editorial without requiring commercial insurance. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and obviously I skipped over that part regarding them saying, obviously, if you want to capture images of it commercially, because again, I feel like their wording is very woolly there, but we're a drone channel, so I'm not going to focus on the legality of that too much. And then David Emma Outdoors following up by saying, I think we should be able to fly in National Trust after a risk assessment. Like, if no one around, then it should be okay. If people are there, fair enough, but I get why they don't allow it. Yeah, I think, to me, if I were in the ivory tower of National Trust HQ and I was looking at this situation, even with the knowledge that the alleged knowledge that I have of drones and drone rules and everything else like that, I do wonder whether I would see any scenario where openly allowing drone pilots to take off from the land and mixing with the locals could work. I think that there's a few scenarios there where I think that could get unstuck. I suppose it could be some kind of official thing or policy or something, but yeah, it's interesting. James Linton, any future updates coming with regard to open category and C labels within the UK? Interesting and informative content as always. Thanks. Yes, James. And thank you for your kind words. There is no news, but we are very quickly heading towards the public consultation from the CAA in terms of the open category, and that public consultation will be part of what decides what's going to happen with C labels and that type of thing. So I would say certainly let us get into summer, late summer, and you're going to start to see those consultations coming out. Certainly, we're going to be letting you know everything that needs to happen in terms of responses from the community when that does happen. All about drones. Mark, hi, good to see you. Hope you're well. People I know that have always been audited by the CAA Public Access Lander. There's nothing on a council's website. The CAA have said they're happy you can fly and not breaking any rules and such. Exactly. And it's just taking that little bit of due consideration, that little bit of reasonable research to find out what the situation is there. But even then, even if a council does have a policy, as we've had in our previous live shows, if you go back to click on our live tab on the channel and go back, and you'll see one there from Richard Ryan, who is a barrister, where we had him on to talk about PSPOs and that type of thing, and the enforceability of council policies. Even if there is a policy in recreational terms, obviously, as Mark here is talking about being audited, etc., so commercial flying under an operational authorization, but in terms of recreational flights, even if there is a policy in place, it might not stop you. It's just about what you do when and if you are actually approached. Yes, I wonder, Ian, what is my Mexican wrestling name? Perhaps I need to get a little mask and things, and yeah, and have that name. Paul Taylor, I took a hike a few days ago to a very scenic valley to fly. Got there, and the airspace was taken over by a dozen or so hawks and kestrels flying in the thermals. I did not fly, and instead just watched them. Yeah, it's incredible to see, isn't it? And I actually have this scenario at my BMFA flying field that I'm a member of, where we also have large birds flying over occasionally, again, depending on time of year and on all sorts of other factors. And I have to say, I usually don't fly at all if they are in the air, just from the point of view of disturbance. But no, I think that's a good thing to do, and actually enjoyed yourself watching them. And Mark saying you need to come fly a model plane with me and discover why drones can be boring. LOL. Yes, indeed. Kernow Radio, I hope you're well. Here in Cornwall, a lot of coast is owned by the National Trust. Most of it is open land and nothing in sight to disturb unless it's a wildlife area. Absolutely, and I will quite openly state that I have taken off from National Trust owned land. Where it is literally an open beach with nobody around and that type of thing, until I was and I haven't been, I would stop if challenged type thing. So no, 100% on that. Chris Hearn is just saying they use the GVC professionally for work and a couple of jobs. The A2 CofC will suffice for what I need to do. I love the recreational side more. Yeah, no, 100% on that. And Lee is saying Geeksvana, woohoo, at long last, consultation time, about time. Yeah, it's coming, and I think it's going to be a really interesting one this time, because with previous consultations like the AMC GM, which were in my opinion too complex in terms of being able to not be understandable but being accessible by a lot of the recreational community, I think there's going to be a lot of onus on ensuring that the actual consultation itself is put out there in a way that many people can understand and access. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what we get this time, because we're a lot more vocal, we're a lot more aware, there's a lot more channels talking about this kind of thing now. So I think that the drone community as a whole here in the UK are more active in these kind of things. So I think that's going to be interesting. Ian Simpson, one question: how many landowners have ever seen a drone risk assessment and been able to comment on it? Risk assessment is only available in people's heads, not worth the paper that they're written on. Yeah, but interesting as well. I think it even comes away from drone risk assessments from the point of view that they are risk assessing what's happening on their land, and what could happen on their land, etc. as well. I would say to that. So there we go. So that is tonight's show. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been an awful lot of fun. One exciting announcement before all 180 of you start to file out the door is that on Thursday afternoon there is the Starship. SpaceX are obviously putting the Starship up for a test. Now that is technically an unmanned flight, and we are able to live stream events there on Geeksvana. So myself and Matt Williams, we're actually going to be doing a special live show where we're going to be talking about the build up and having a look at it, because it's going to be the Starship obviously is intended to take people to Mars, but it is still a historic unmanned flight. So we're going to be doing a live show on it and having a chat about it and seeing where we think this takes us. It's going to be a lot of fun. So do join us. That'll be Thursday lunchtime. Thursday evening, I'll be on air again with Graham talking about some CAA stuff. More on that to come. And we have another video coming out tomorrow, which is actually a really cool tip that I found for pretty much decoding flying your drone in the EU completely with just one link. I can give you one link that will help you fly any EASA member state country to know where the FRZs are, everything, all in one link. And that's in tomorrow's video, so keep an eye out for that one. So as I say, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I really appreciate you coming along. Great numbers this evening. Thank you. It means an awful lot to me that all the preparation, all the research, etc., pays off when I see your smiling chats coming back at me. Smiling chats? I'm going to get out of here before I'm accused of being drunk. Thanks, everyone. See you next time on Geeksvana Live. Bye-bye.